Jane, you work with some of the most talented young athletes in the world. What kind of thoughts or stories do you notice most in athletes who have a hard time performing under pressure?
Um, first of all, I work with plus 15, so that's the minimum age of athletes that I work with. Earlier on, I worked with younger ages, but I found out that I was a part of why they felt the pressure so hard. So when I got, I don't know, wiser or more developed in my own thinking about uh, what's the age for being able to develop a mindset, being able to work with values, being able to work with one's own development. I said that the minimum age is 15 years old. And even when they are 15 years old, I always work with the parents on the side as well. So what I find that these young people struggle with is mostly being enough. Like they have this pressure of always wanting to do something more and not ever being satisfied, always thriving for being better, stronger, faster, thriving for better results, being really focused on performing on all areas in their lives. And this kind of pressure makes it really hard for them to live a life where they are balanced, but also a life where they can just, um, what do you say, slow down, do nothing, just be. So that's the main focus I have in most of my conversation with young athletes.
Hmm. And based on your experience, why do you think that these stories not only are there to begin with, but they're so hardwired to the athlete's identity that it almost creates as like a self-sabotage kind of loop or vicious cycle in a way that is like so much pressure thinking that we need to do more that in reality we're just almost having a self-fulfilling prophecy because we don't perform well because we put a lot of pressure on us because we feel that we're unworthy, and when we don't get results because we get too much pressure, then it reinforces that story over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, mm, well, in the world of sports, what's happening in a lot of countries, at least in Denmark, is what happened is that we specialize and we what do you call it? We recruit athletes earlier than we did like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So earlier on, there are these special programs for talent development, and which make makes it possible for a lot of kids to join an academy or join extra trainings or personal trainings. And this makes that, well, the result is that a lot of people do, a lot of young kids in their childhood spend a lot of time developing skills regarding to their sports. So they train a lot and they spend all their weekends. They go on camps and holidays. Maybe they train almost every day. So there's not much time left for doing something else, as just play or be with your family or take a walk with your dog or bake a cake or watch some TV or whatever, just to relax. And in that way, sport becomes a part of the way that they develop their identity really early on. So where we just 15 years ago saw that you would specialize when you are 14, 15 years old. Today you specialize when you are between 10 and 12. So you decide at that point, when you are like just a really young child, you decide what you want to be really good at. So you stop doing a lot of different sports. You just go with one sport, because the sports at that age tend to take up all of their time in a really early age. So of course, these kids, they grow up and sport become a huge part of how they see themselves, not just the sports, but also this urge to perform and to make results, and the way that they, I don't know, describe themselves, the way that they define their own worth is based on how they perform and what kind of results they deliver.
Hmm. Are you familiar, well, with the work of there's this guy called David Epstein. He has a fascinating TEDx talk, says that is titled "How Falling Behind Can Get You Far Ahead in Life," and his whole hypothesis has been how sometimes when we struggle finding our passion or finding our things that we're good at, and we feel that maybe in our late teens, early 20s, we're falling behind uh, when it comes to in comparison to our peers or our friends. But that actually give us, like, once we discover what we are very good at or what we're supposed to do, then that transform into, we have more skills that were developed through these other activities. And he puts an example outside the Tiger Woods of the world or the Serena Williams of the world. He mentions even Roger Federer, who plays so many different sports, and he wasn't very much into tennis. Even his mom said that, and he became, to me, arguably the greatest tennis players of all time. But then he played rugby, he played soccer, he played basketball, he played all these sports, and the interesting part about it was that it seems to me that even though there's studies how our brains are better if we just basically reframe and how we see the world, but also how we see the skills we develop, yet it seems to me that we have become a culture who's obsessed with performance and outcomes, as you said. Now you need to be very skilled at the age of 10 or 12, which for a kid is almost like the entire identity. And at some point it can create an identity crisis, well, definitely in young people, but even I've seen it in adults. What do you think could be the antidote for this identity crisis that many people feel based on this obsession or even these societal expectations of always performing and always getting great outcomes?
Well, because we live, some of us, in societies like that are very performance driven, performance oriented, where you get what's it called? Um, yeah, I don't know. You get recognition from what you are capable of in terms of performance, and because we live in those societies, it is we can't just change that. So we have a school system, we have like a culture, we have a sports industry at the moment also that's developed into that. So what I always say is that we only have one choice in these families, and that is that we make sure that home, around the dining table, in the car, to and from practice, to and from competition, what we talk about after competitions, what we talk about when we say goodnight, what type of questions we ask, what kind of energy we put into the way we are with our kids. This is where we can make a difference. This is where we can balance the world for our kids in a way where they learn that you are enough just by being who you are. You don't need to be able to perform. You don't need to deliver any results or any grades in any way for me to love you. So if we can have that point of view in our homes and in the way that we bring up our children, I think that we have a way higher possibility for our kids to grow a balanced psychological flexibility, which is basically what we need for us to thrive in the long run. So that's my way when I work with parents, when I work with families that have children that love sports and where sports is a big part of their lives and where they prioritize that. Then I make sure to help the parents navigate in this very result oriented culture by having no focus on results at home.
Hmm. That I guess it's interesting because I think it's tricky because to me, there's a very fine line between I want my kids to do great. I want them to perform well because I'm afraid that life is too hard. So I'm preparing them for life, whether you're an athlete or just a person who is dealing with jobs or entrepreneurship, anything. But I guess the tricky part comes from the fact that if you value too much or if you put too much attention to the results, then you create this overachiever who believes at a very young age that love is conditional, that acceptance is conditional, that only if I perform well, only if I get good results, then I'll be loved. And they go out and achieve great things in life, but they always feel unfulfilled. They always feel empty. They're trying to fill that void that hopefully when I get the next medal or the next milestone or the next job, then I'm finally going to feel worthy, and then they're not. But on the flip side, if you don't care too much about the results, but any results is a good results, then we have this culture of the participation trophy, and it's almost like okay, it doesn't matter, we're all winners, and then we condition kids to not even try hard and not even push themselves to find or to achieve certain goals. And I feel that that fine line between, well, don't do too much but also do something, is what makes parents doubt. It's like, okay, I don't even know how to train my kids. I guess everyone says that we should focus on the process more so than the outcomes. But how can even somebody, whether you're a kid or whether you're a parent and you're teaching your kid, or even you're an adult and trying to reteach yourself, how can somebody start focusing? What tools do you recommend people to use to reteach their bodies and their brains to focus more on the process and be okay without relying too much on outcomes that at the end of the day are technically speaking outside of our control?
Well, I just want to mention here that um, so this is so my advice here is based on the fact that our children grow up in a society, in a sports culture, in a school culture, and in society in general that has a full focus on results and on performance. And because they do that, we need to balance it. So us as parents need to balance our child's development in a way where they know that when I am with my parents, with my siblings in my home, I don't need to be able to perform anything. They just want to be with me. They just want to spend time with me. So because we live in 2025 in societies that are so focused on the performance, we need to balance it at home. So what I do, because that is different, that is difficult for a lot of parents, but also because um, it is a change in generations. So we are making a shift here because a lot of us that have parents or that have children now that go to sports, we grew up with parents that were also very result oriented, but we didn't grow up in a society that had this focus in the same way. So things have changed there. So what I talk to parents about, when they understand like the big picture here, often they totally get the importance of balance, this development in their child. But just because you understand something is not the same as being able to change it. So in that perspective, we do some work with trying to figure out, why is it so important for me that my kid perform? So what is it, what kind of values do I put into making great results? What is it that I am, as a parent, afraid of will happen to my child if they do not perform well? And then we work with that, so that we take it back to the parent and look at, what is it that's triggering me here, and how do I deal with that? So because this is not just tools or some kind of way we can fix things really quickly. I can just start asking other questions, or I can just stop asking questions, or I can just saying some kind of specific sentences to my child, and then everything is okay. It needs to be authentic, and it needs to be real. So for a parent, you really need to understand what's in it for me here. What is it that's bothering me? What is it that's triggering me? And where do my aim to focus on the results come from? What is it that I'm typically afraid of?
Hmm. I I like a lot what you said there, and it's true. I guess, it's part of society, it's part of our culture, it's part of the school system, the sports industry. It's all about performance, all about outcomes. We understand that. I mean, outcomes is what get us to, is a kind of like a trackable uh, measure, or even how we can figure out who's better, who's worse, and it serves as a form of evaluation. And I understand that. I guess if you're a parent, you should probably, as you said, balance, just bring some balance and tell your kid that, hey, it is okay, we can focus on the process rather than whatever, whether you score some goals, score some basket, won some tennis matches, you name it. But I think at the same time, and I wonder, because this is a question that's been in my mind for a while now, and I've asked different people, psychologists, about it, and some other experts as well, when it comes to self-worth. And I feel, it seems to me that that is almost like a human nature's feeling unworthy, feeling undeserving, for whatever reason, whether we don't deserve success, or we don't deserve love, or we don't deserve friendship, or we don't deserve connection. But especially from you that work with athletes, you can work with people that are the quote unquote the best of the best in their class, or in their city, or even in their country, that all of us suffer from the same thing. Even when it comes to you personally, or the people that you have coached, have you found a way to rewire that part of the brain that makes us feel unworthy, and then just being at peace with the fact of who we are, and everything else is a cherry on top? Or how can we just reframe the way that we feel, and to be at peace with who we are?
Well, the way that I work with people is that we have a lot of different sides inside of us. And I work with trying to accept all of them. So some of them has had like a really loud voice over years, and some of them maybe we recognize that it's not good for me to be so much in touch with this part of me. So I need to learn how to shut that down a bit, but I can't really get rid of it. So that's the basic that we need to understand, that we have all different side of us. Some of the sides get triggered by something, other sides get triggered by other things, but they are there. And our work is never trying to get rid of any of these sides. It's never about It's never about finding a way where they don't have any place inside of us. It's more about accepting that that is also a part of me. I can be triggered in this situation, and when I get triggered in this situation, this side of me gets really loud. And then by accepting that that is how it is for me, and that's by accepting that, when we work with the acceptance, we work with trying to understand, why is this side so loud? Why does it yell at me like that? Or why is it so bothered? Or why is it so irritated? There's always a good reason for us to develop different kind of sides. It's been a part of our survival. So some of the sides, we can go way back to where we were young children, and we had to develop some kind of way to handle when things got rough. Maybe we experienced something with our parents. Maybe we had a mother that were in a certain way, or a father that had his tendency, or we had different kinds of experiences at school, or maybe at our sport, that made us develop some sides that worked really well at that point. They made us survive. Maybe we shut part of ourselves down. We got quiet, or maybe we got really angry and we yelled and we kicked and we hit someone because we yelled out for help, or and and sometimes those sides, they get, of course they get triggered when we are under pressure as adults or as young people. And when the first step to understand or to accept that the things are as they are, and we that's also a part of who I am, is to understand, okay, so I developed this side because of this. Oh, that makes sense. It helped me back then. But right now, I don't need it anymore to help me, because I found another way to be in these situations that are way better for me. So it's time to, shut a part of it down. Not that it's not there. It can get triggered all of my life, and I will probably have to work with it the rest of my life. But through an understanding of this side has helped me in some way earlier on, I can more easily accept it being a part of me. And when I can accept it being a part of me, maybe I can have more warm feelings about it. Like, I can, okay, so it actually tried to help me back then. Right now, it's not helping me anymore. So you know, I try to focus on something else when it starts saying things or whatever it does. Yeah, does that make sense?
100%. And I love that a lot, because that's some of the things that I've been working on in my personal life in the last, whatever, 2 years or so, in terms of, instead of feeling shame or embarrassment for some triggers, some reactions, or the way that I think, is having enough self-awareness to have self-compassion and to understand that kept you alive at some point. That was a survival instinct. Now, you should just thank that part of you for helping you make it this far, but that part of you doesn't serve you anymore. And it's cutting ties in a very kindly way, because I think that that's the part that we struggle the most. We can be very compassionate and kind to other people, but when it comes to ourselves, we are like this surgeon, and we just be very, very tough on ourselves, and we feel that that's how we should perform, whether school and sports, in life. And yes, it's now leaving that part behind brings a lot of grief. People don't kind of realize that, and but at the same time, is is understanding understanding why was there to begin with. And maybe it won't make sense to you now, or the way that you're behaving today might not make sense. But yes, it was very, very clear, and it touched a nerve in me, because that is part of the work I've been doing. And I've tried to help friends to just figure that out, to even become aware, which is very, very hard. But one thing that I like about your answer, but also I find fascinating in the world of athletics, is the fact that it seems to me, because also it applies to people who choose a career at the age of 18 and the age of 30, they are unfulfilled, is that we have this, we fall in the trap of the sunk cost fallacy. For those who don't know, the sunk cost fallacy is when we have done when we have invested time, effort, even money in something for a period of time, and it doesn't serve us anymore, or we don't feel fulfilled anymore. But it's hard for us to quit because we have already invested so much. And I feel that maybe, perhaps, a lot of athletes become so wrapped up in their sport that they feel trapped, and they're unable to leave because all of the what they have invested. It's almost like I'm too afraid, and part of me, I need to feel worthy, as we were mentioning earlier. So I need to keep going even though I don't enjoy sports anymore. I used to play for fun, now I'm playing just to feel some level of worthy, or just some level of worth. And yet that then you find yourself in misalignment. Have you found cases with the people you coach, or even in your life, where you're not doing it anymore for fun or for fulfillment or for happiness, but because you feel like you have to, because you have invested so much in the sports or the discipline?
Yeah, sure. I think a part of almost every world-class athletes, they will recognize that a part of them feels this way. But I think there are so many other parts as well at the same time. So of course, when you've been doing one thing your whole life and you made a career out of it, so the transition between doing what you know the best and where you have found a way where you are special and you have prioritized everything around this activity, the transition to finding yourself in other arenas in your life, creating a new identity, that is terrifying for most athletes. Of course, that's terrifying. So I think that's just to take that into consideration also when we talk about maybe being in sports longer than your body is actually calling for, or maybe also your mindset about you want to create a family, you want to have a job, you don't want to be tied up by tight schedules anymore in the same way. But it can be really, really hard to take a decision on doing that transition. And a lot of athletes, they also talk a lot about, I just want to make it to that last performance. But when you have like a whole career and you want to end on top, then it's such a big pressure to end a career like that. So it becomes so important to end something well, that in your thriving for making like the greatest performance is actually, how do you say that, actually maybe just because you put it into yeah, maybe because it's so important for you, it becomes so difficult. So that's, but it's also just quite normal. Of course you want to end on top, of course you want to just, one last performance, one last Olympic, one last world championship, one last European championship. It makes sense. But yeah, so yeah, that is a part of the mental work we do, the part of the psychological training, and the part of the self-development that I do with
How
athletes.
do how does that psychological training looks like? Is it kind of like a standard thing, or is it like case by case, or athlete by athlete?
It's always athletes by athletes, so I don't work in the same way with anyone. You can say of course some of the themes that we go through are similar to each other, but they fight with different things. They live in different ways, they think differently, they feel differently. So yeah, it's very different. It's from person to person. I never work with them as athletes. I work with them as a human being in a world. So of course we talk about their sports, but we talk way more about who they are and uh, what their obstacles are. No matter if it's sometimes it is in sports, but a lot of times it's just life.
Yeah, it's just I guess that is something that I don't know if coaches do the same thing. I feel that perhaps more more institutions, more teams should have a some sort of mindset coach, because I do feel that between a very good athlete or a great athlete to the very elite athlete, or those who win gold medal against those who stayed on like fourth place, is their mindset. Because when it comes to athletic ability, when it comes to conditioning, when it comes to a skill set, they're pretty much very equal. But it's what happens between your ears what will determine how successful or how much of a performance you will have. But one thing that you mentioned that I wanted to really ask you, that you mentioned on your TEDx talk, was that you have to become someone before you can become something. How do you define becoming someone?
I define it by learning about who you are, what's important to you, what do you like, how do you feel, what are you thinking, what do you want from life. Like I'm not ever interested in the way that they perform. I do never talk about results. I do never ask in where they are on any ranking lists or anything like that. So all of my conversations are only based on who they are and how they experience life.
Hmm. So it's almost like it's like people, somebody said, do people like me for who I am or for what I have? Kind of similar to that in terms of, are you interested in me? Whether I achieve nothing, whether I suck at sports, whether I suck at school, are you as a me as a person, as a human being, rather than what I have? And when I guess when you change that approach, then the sense of unworthiness slowly start changing to some extent, because now I'm not a human. I'm not less than. I'm no more than. And I don't need to have these external achievements to feel that I belong to a group, to belong to a team, or somewhere else. I guess. I mean, I. So, what are the signs when somebody have become someone? How can we tell that, okay, I have become someone? I'm at peace with who I am.
Well, they are always someone. So they're not becoming someone. They are always someone, but their mindset about themselves tells us something about what they value. So if I work with um with a work with a young woman or a young man that's very focused on the goals that they want to reach and how they're reaching the goals and why it's so important, and they are a lot in their head regarding to the future, that is very based on what they want to achieve. Then the work starts by navigating in a whole other direction, talking more about what they like and why they like it, what kind of relations they have, and why some relations are good and some relations are bad, and how they experience themselves in this setting and in this setting, and what does their body tells them, what's difficult for them, what can they be triggered by, why do they think they can be triggered by that. So there are a lot of work there where we need to develop another perspective on themselves so that they get to know themselves better, and knowing that they are enough, they are someone, they are someone that is very um, focused on becoming something, but we try to take the focus back to just being someone, and then when you are happy doing what you do, the something will come eventually. That's the bonus of it. But if you thrive and thrive and thrive for becoming something, and you don't really have figured out who you are, then it will be a lifelong struggle.
Hmm. I guess makes sense for those people who have spent the entire life becoming something and achieve and trying to achieve that level of success or validation, and internally they feel miserable, they feel unfulfilled, as we were talking earlier. It's almost like everything has to be a performance, and when you do that, I guess you're not truly being yourself, because you cannot let that, because you don't even know who you are, basically. And when you're not being yourself, then the world that you have created around you is not for you, technically speaking, because people see you as as the performance you're putting on, and will make you even more miserable, because you end in this loop that if I'm not this person, then people won't like me, so I have to be this person, which reinforces the idea that nobody will like me unless I'm this person. But if we start being very curious about who we are, what makes us unique, what lights us up, and all of that, as you said, the becoming something comes out as a byproduct. It's almost like the cherry on top. Like, okay, we don't need it, but it will come almost automatically because we feel at peace with who we are, which is, I think, uh, it's a wonderful concept that is simple, but it's not easy. Uh,
Yeah.
just to reach that point. And I think that I wanted to just touch very quickly, because I'm fascinated with mental toughness, and you work a lot, once again, with athletes that require a lot of mental strength. What have you found the difference to be between the mental toughness that is rooted in fear or ego, and the kind of the inner strength that comes from, let's say, self-trust and alignment?
Oh, I think when when the mental toughness comes from, inner strength and alignment. Did you say that? Was that the word? Um,
Yes, I said, when it comes from inner strength, well, the inner strength comes from self trust and alignment rather than mental
yeah,
toughness rooted in fear and ego. Hmm.
yeah. I think you can say it really simple. So the one way where it comes from inside, we know about the inner motivation versus the external innovation, the internal versus the external motivation. We know the fact that that is something that will last. So you will be able to do it again and again and again. Where when you are mostly motivated from external factors, which will, I don't know if you can say there is a clear line to the anger or frustration, but it won't last. Like, you can't keep doing it. It will it will failure at some point. So yeah, that's basically the difference.
Hmm. So I guess for somebody would be, if I'm running away from something, right? If I'm running away from quote unquote failure, or abandonment, or not feeling love, then that is rooted in fear and ego. But then if I do it because it feels right, just because it comes out of intuition, then it's more that inner strength. I guess that's how people can identify that. Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, but maybe not intuition. I wouldn't say that, because motivation is for all of us also external. And especially for world-class athletes that has a career in sports, that's their job. They need to be able to also be result oriented and focus on the performance. So it's more the balance between the external and the internal. So when the external has too much focus, the the you are more likely not to be able to keep doing it. So when you work on having your motivation internally and coming from something that uh, feels right for you most of the time, because it's never always, then you are more likely to keep being able to do it in a good way.
Yeah, I guess it's all finding that balance between
Yeah.
using both. But then if we go too extreme, where there is extreme fear and ego, then we will just burn out and we will just crash. But if we do a lot of based on or how we feel, we're probably never gonna reach that elite level. Huh. I like that a lot. I like that way of seeing things. Jane, I wish I could have you for longer. We are short of time, but as a closing question, I would love to ask you, what would you say to someone who's burnout, not because they're working too hard, but because they have been chasing the wrong definition of success?
I would say slow down. When we are close to a burnout or in the middle of a burnout, it's always about slowing down, reconnect with your body, reconnect with your mind. If you have been overloaded for too long time, then your body will set out, your mind will set up, and you can't make any good decisions from that point. So always slow down, stop training so much, stop doing so much, stop competing for some time, and then, do things that you like, be with people that you love, eat things that you like, watch shows that you like. If you like to be creative, be creative. If you like to go for walks, go for walks. Do things that you like for a longer period of time, and then we will start the work, the psychological work.
Mm. I guess yes, it's having the self care that we think that we don't need because we need to push harder and harder. And I I was burned out like 4 times last year, and this year I need to do things differently because I cannot keep this going. And it's about slowing down. I think in Europe might be easier that concept. Here in America, it's like go 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 hustle hustle hustle. So I love that, and we need that reminder. I know that I probably have heard that a million times, and yet I'm having a hard time doing it. So every time that I get that reminder, okay, good, slow down, just chill. Things are going to work out. Just have that self care if you want to perform long term. At the end of the day, it's like the cliche phrase: "This is not a sprint; it's a marathon." And you have to pace yourself in order to make it till the end. So, love that.
Yeah, and maybe
Jane,
you don't have to. Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah,
just have to one last thing. So maybe you don't have to
yeah,
look
for
at it
sure.
as a marathon either. Like a marathon also really long, hard struggle, right? You need to push
Yeah,
yourself.
it
And
is. It is. It is.
in
It is.
if you are in a burnout, or you are close to a burnout, or you know yourself and you know your body's signs and your mind signs to, hey, it's getting close now, then the best advice here is that slow down every day. It's not the same as doing nothing, but every time you do something, as recording this podcast, make sure that 10 minutes before you record and 10 minutes after you record, you do something very slow. And then you do something else, next activity during the day. Then before the activity and after the activity, you do something very slow. In that way, you balance your system throughout the day so that you don't just go high pace several days in a row.
I love that. I never heard that strategy before. I'm going to start applying to my life and see if I can just still accomplish things I want to accomplish in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year, but applying those breaks or those things that can just, balance everything out. Jane, I have to bring you back at some point because I had a ton more questions about this, and I find this topic fascinating. How our brains can define our life based on how the stories we tell ourselves, the way that we treat ourselves, and the way we are being conditioned by our parents, by society, and everything. But yes, fascinating conversation. Where can people know more about you, know more of your work, anything?
Yeah, well, for now, my website is only in Danish. But yeah, it's mentalmotion.dk, and you can read about it there. Maybe get some translation on it. I will work on having a site with English, but it's not up running yet.
Okay, perfect. I still, hey, I can. People can always click translate, and Google will translate automatically. But then
Sure.
I would invite anybody to watch your TEDx because it was like a fascinating topic about how we view success, how we view the process and achievements and all of that. Jane, once again, was a complete pleasure having you on, and I hope we can do this again in the future.
Thanks for having me.